Welcome back to Discover ARRT. In today's video, we'll review ARRT's discipline documents. Our discipline documents are constructed specifically to each discipline, but their format and use is consistent across all disciplines. These documents can help educators understand the types of content and task knowledge that may be reflected on the examination. Each ARRT examination is built on a task inventory and detailed content specifications and outline. The discipline documents we will review are the task inventory, content specifications, and the didactic and clinical competencies, or clinical experience requirements. Before we dive into the specific documents, let's take a quick step back and talk about something important, a practice analysis. You might also hear it referred to as a job analysis, and it's basically a detailed look at what people do when they first enter a profession. It outlines the job responsibilities that are currently performed and would be expected to be performed by someone at the entry level. This information helps us figure out what knowledge and skills are needed to do the job at an entry level. We use the results of these practice analyses to make important decisions like setting clinical requirements and competencies for each discipline. We also use them to develop the content for our exams. Now, practice analyses aren't just helpful, they are essential. If we want our certification and registration programs to be recognized by accrediting bodies like the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, NCCA, or the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, we must do them. So how does it work? Usually a committee of volunteer subject matter experts, typically registered technologists in that discipline, work with ARRT staff to create a survey. ARRT sends out this detailed survey to a national sample of professionals in that discipline. The number of surveys sent out can range from anywhere from 600 to over 2,000 people. The whole process is carefully overseen by our psychometricians and a panel of subject matter experts in that discipline. It's a big project, and each one takes between 12 to 36 months to complete. In the end, the practice analysis helps us produce a final report, a task inventory, clinical competency requirements, or clinical experience requirements, and content specifications. Now that we've reviewed what a practice analysis is, let's shift our focus to something closely connected, the task inventory. Before we go too far, a quick note for those familiar with the Registered Radiologist Assistant certification. In that discipline, we don't use the term task inventory. Instead, we say entry-level clinical activities. But for simplicity and consistency throughout this video, we'll continue using the term task inventory. So how do we build the task inventory? It starts with the results of the practice analysis survey. If 40% or more of the technologists we surveyed say they perform a particular activity, that task is typically included. The task inventory is essentially a list of job responsibilities that entry-level technologists are commonly expected to perform. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes we'll include a task even if it doesn't meet the 40% threshold. Why? Because it may be critical in certain settings, especially if it involves emerging technologies or high-impact responsibilities. Think CPR. We hope technologists aren't performing CPR 40% of their workload, but it is a critical task to know. The task inventory serves as the foundation for other important certification and registration requirements. Look at this sample task inventory. In the upper right corner, you'll find the approval date from the ARRT board, along with the date the document will be implemented. The layout is pretty straightforward. Tasks are grouped by activity and content categories, with each task listed individually. While each discipline's task inventory is unique, the order usually follows a logical flow, from early steps in a procedure all the way through to the procedure itself. Let's look at Activity 4 on this sample, Obtain Pertinent Medical History. Next to it, you'll see a code, PC.1.A.2.A. This is what we call content mapping, or sometimes content coding. That means this content code maps the task inventory to the content outline. Here's a sample of a content outline. This content code shows PC, meaning patient care, 1, which refers to patient interactions and management, A, which is ethical and legal aspects, 2, which is legal issues, and A, which is verification. So how can you use the task inventory in your program? It can be a valuable resource when developing or updating your curriculum. It gives you a clear picture of what technologists are actually doing in the field, so your program stays relevant, accurate, and aligned with real-world practice. All right, now that you've got a solid understanding of the task inventory, let's move on and explore the content outline and content specifications in more detail. Once the task inventory is complete, the next step is to review the content outline and content specifications. Both are found in the same document and together. They help shape what the ARRT exam will cover. As we mentioned before, an advisory committee made up of subject matter experts in that discipline determines the knowledge and cognitive skills needed to perform the activities listed in the task inventory. From there, those knowledge areas are grouped into content categories within the content outline. And here's something important. Every activity on the task inventory must be linked or mapped to a section in the content outline. That way, everything is connected and consistent. The primary goal of ARRT exams is to assess the knowledge and cognitive skills that entry-level technologists need to perform their jobs safely and effectively. That's why we only include topics in our content specifications if they directly relate to one or more activities in the task inventory. We also steer clear of topics that have conflicting perspectives in the field. We focus on content that's clear, validated, and job relevant. Now, keep in mind that the content outline and content specifications are not intended to serve as a curriculum guide. Educational programs are often, and should be, broader. While they usually cover what's in the specifications, they're not limited to it. Here's an example of one of our content specifications. You'll notice it's divided into content categories, along with the number of scored questions in each. Many categories are also broken down into sub-content categories, giving students a clear picture of what to expect. This document is a great resource for students. It shows what categories to focus on and how many questions each will include, so they can prepare more strategically. The next page is the content outline. This gives a more detailed look at what areas of content might appear on the exam. It's another helpful tool for students. It's not a guarantee of what will be on the exam, but it gives a strong sense of what could be on the exam. A quick note, not every discipline includes every content category in the outline. For example, bone densitometry doesn't have a separate safety section. That's because most of the content is already covered in the radiography exam. Bone densitometry is a post-primary certification, which means candidates must already hold a radiography certification before taking the exam. Safety topics specific to bone densitometry are instead woven into other areas like image production or procedures. When you look at the procedures section of the content outline, you may see something called focus of questions. Sometimes it's a detailed paragraph at the beginning of the section. Other times, it's a specific line for each subcategory. These sections provide additional context, calling out things like anatomy, medical devices, or other important details that are specific to the discipline. There are 10 disciplines that include a focus of questions section for each subcategory in the procedure section: breast sonography, cardiac interventional radiography, vascular interventional radiography, computed tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, nuclear medicine technology, sonography, vascular sonography, mammography, and limited scope of practice. And there's 2 disciplines, radiography and registered radiologist assistant, where the extra detail appears at the beginning of the procedure section rather than under each subcategory. So to wrap this section up, the content specifications and content outline play a vital role in exam development, and they're great tools for both educators and students to better understand what the exam covers. Now, let's talk about an important part of the certification and registration process: didactic and clinical competency requirements. Before a candidate can apply for certification and registration through either the primary pathway or the registered radiologist assistant pathway, they need to meet several requirements. These are completing relevant coursework, what we call didactic requirements, and demonstrating competence in a set list of clinical procedures. These are the clinical competency requirements. Both sets of requirements are completed as part of an ARRT-approved educational program. Let's start with didactic competencies. The goal here is to make sure candidates have the fundamental knowledge they need in their discipline, can integrate theory into practice, and are developing strong critical thinking skills. To meet these requirements, candidates must complete coursework that addresses the content areas defined in ARRT's content specifications. These are built into the curriculum of their approved educational program. Now, let's look at clinical competency requirements. These refer to specific clinical procedures that candidates must demonstrate, either by performing them with patients or in simulated situations. We update these requirements based on our practice analysis studies so they stay relevant to what's happening in the field. During their education, candidates must show that they can perform all mandatory competencies. These are considered essential for every RT, and a percentage of elective competencies, which give flexibility and show demonstration of other valuable skills. So, how do candidates demonstrate their skills? Each procedure must be performed independently, consistently, and effectively, all during the candidate's formal education. In general, programs decide how candidates demonstrate their competencies, except in certain cases. ARRT determines when a skill must be demonstrated using actual patient care rather than simulation. This ensures that learning experiences are appropriate and realistic. For more information about simulation, see the Simulated Performance section in the Clinical Competency Requirements document for that discipline. When a candidate applies for certification and registration, the program director is responsible for verifying that the candidate has demonstrated competence in the required procedures. Programs can choose any format to track student progress and performance. Program directors also decide who evaluates the candidate, when those evaluations take place, and they're responsible for ensuring the validity of the evaluation methods. ARRT's competency requirements are designed to make sure every candidate has completed both the didactic and clinical components necessary for safe and effective practice. Within these requirements, programs still have the flexibility to decide how candidates demonstrate clinical competence, what additional competencies to include, and what performance standards apply. At the end of the day, these requirements ensure that every RT that enters the profession is well prepared, highly competent, and ready to provide the best care possible. Finally, let's talk about an important piece of the post-primary pathway to certification and registration: clinical experience requirements. Clinical experience is a key step in earning an ARRT credential through a post-primary discipline. To meet this requirement, candidates must perform and document a specific number of clinical procedures before applying for certification and registration. There's a time limit to keep in mind. All clinical procedures must be performed within 24 months before you submit your application. Any procedures performed outside that 24-month window will automatically expire. However, once a candidate applies for the post-primary exam and receives their exam window, these procedures are locked in and will no longer expire. As candidates complete the procedures, they should use ARRT's online clinical experience tool to document the procedures they've performed and request that verifiers confirm their work. Let's talk about daily reporting limits. These limits exist for a reason. Studies show that people learn better through short, repeated training sessions over time, rather than cramming everything into fewer, longer sessions. That's why we limit how many clinical experience entries can be reported each day. Note, this limit is on reporting, not on how many procedures candidates can perform. Here's a quick overview of the maximum entries allowed per day based on the discipline. Bone densitometry, 15. Breast sonography, 9. Cardiac interventional radiography, 8. Computed tomography, 9. Magnetic resonance imaging, 7. Mammography, 16. Vascular interventional radiography, 10. Vascular sonography, 8. One last note, let's talk about remote scanning. ARRT does not accept remote scanning for completion of clinical competency or clinical experience requirements. Candidates must be physically present and interact with the patient at the facility where the procedure is performed. That means being on site with the patient and the equipment during the exam or procedure. So, where can you find all the documents we talked about today? It's easy. Just head over to arrt.org. Right on the homepage, you'll see an icon called Discipline Documents. Click there and you're in. Or, if you prefer, scroll down to the bottom of the page. Under Quick Links, you'll also see a link for discipline documents. These documents are publicly available, so there's no need to log in. Just click and explore. While you're there, check out some of the other useful resources like the Practice Analysis Report, exam statistics, and standard setting reports. And that brings us to the end of this video. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding practice analyses to breaking down the task inventory, content outline, and content specifications. We also explored the important roles of didactic and clinical competency requirements and wrapped up with the details of clinical experience requirements for post-primary pathways. Each of these components plays a key role in building a strong, well-prepared candidate ready to take the next step in their professional journey. And remember, everything we talked about today can be found at arrt.org. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share the video. And don't forget to leave a comment about what topics you would like to see covered in upcoming videos. See you next time.